Hello and welcome to episode 356 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. And Ian, you sound far away today. Where are you?
I'm thousands of miles away. I'm in Stockholm this week.
I knew I heard something different. What's in Stockholm? You wanted to get away from the cold of Chicago, so you went to Stockholm, Sweden.
Sunny and warm Stockholm. Yeah, I traded -10 at home for -8 in Stockholm.
Hey.
But it snowed all day, so that's been fun.
In Stockholm? It snowed?
It snowed all day, yeah. There's snow on the ground outside of where there are heated sidewalks, and there are flurries all day. So it was kind of like a winter wonderland feel today. But we're enjoying the cold here. We're adding a member to my team this week. So we've got a new member joining. So I've come to introduce him to Flight Radar 24 and to help him get settled and do all sorts of fun Flight Radar 24 stuff.
That's great. Your winter wonderland sounds nice because we are very far past that here in New York with our stage of winter and snow covering. We are no longer a winterland, and I'd very much like to be where you are right now.
It's just dirt snow now.
And it won't go away. This is the longest streak of below freezing we've had in the Northeast for a very, very long time, and it is unpleasant here. But next week, I am traveling as well, but I'm not going to Sweden. I am going somewhere much warmer than that, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll hear about that when you're back. I'm pre-salty about your trip next week.
Well, everything here in New York is salty from the road salt, so it's fine. You'll blend right in.
Perfect. Well, we've got a good show this week, not the least of which because things have happened that we get to talk about, both good and bad. So we'll start with a good thing that has finally happened.
An overdue thing, a very overdue thing.
Very, very overdue. This week, the FAA finalized its rule mandating 25-hour recording space on the cockpit voice recorders. So this is years in the making.
Years in the making, again, as we've talked many times, and so has the NTSB, years in the making, not due to any technological or really even cost issue, just simply bureaucratic and a lot of hand tossing saying, no, we don't want this reasons.
Right. So what we're dealing with is the old regulations only mandated 2 hours of recording time for the cockpit voice recorders. And over the past few years, we've seen a number of incidents where the cockpit voice recorder was overwritten because something happened and the flight continued and it was longer than 2 hours. And so by the time investigators were notified of the incident, there was no longer any audio record of what had happened. And the NTSB has been calling this out for years. And the FAA finally got around to saying, okay, you know what? We've studied the issue long enough. We're going to say we have the technology, we have the ability. We're going to mandate 25-hour cockpit voice recorders for most aircraft. So that proposed rule came out months ago. And this week they finalized that rule, mandating 25-hour cockpit voice recorders for any aircraft that was manufactured beginning in May of 2025. That's covered by the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act.
Finally. Very long overdue. Never should have taken this long. And you said the NTSB has been going on about this for years, but I'm pretty sure at this point it's decades, not just years.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished, I guess. Good to know that it's already pretty much in effect for new aircraft. They're already coming with 25-hour CVRs. I'd love to know how they came to 25 hours and not 24 hours. I'm sure there's a many page analysis of that, just needing that extra hour somewhere, probably derived by, like maximum flight time from end of the planet. And that's actually kind of interesting. Never really thought about that 25-hour number before.
We're going to have to think about that some and figure out where that 25-hour number comes from. And we'll do some research. Jason, thank you for volunteering.
Hey, Google, can you look into that for me? No, it can't. Sorry.
It can't.
I don't even have it plugged in.
Fair enough. So the rule goes into effect. One thing that it's a bit tricky.
This is where it gets a bit muddy.
Yeah. So one thing that this particular rule doesn't do is mandate the retrofit of existing aircraft that would otherwise be covered by this rule to retrofit those aircraft, because the FAA says the mandated retrofit of aircraft that would otherwise be covered by this act that have already been built are covered separately under the act, and therefore don't need to be included in this rule because they're separately covered, and including them in this rule would actually delay the implementation of the rule.
Interesting.
So that's thoroughly confusing and a bureaucratic nightmare. But the long and the short of it is, for most aircraft, and this includes all commercial aircraft where you can, buy a ticket and book a flight, those aircraft by 2030 will have 25-hour cockpit voice recording technology.
Hooray. About time.
Better late than never.
Yes, there are other aircraft, smaller aircraft, that have a bit of a longer runway, I think, until February 2nd, 2029, for aircraft with a maximum certified takeoff weight of 59,524 pounds or less. So there's a bit of, again, flexibility, but practically speaking, any aircraft you're buying a commercial ticket for, this will be included. A friend of the show, Seth Miller, dug into the regulatory filing and pulled out actually one of the pages. I guess the NTSB provided data to the FAA on all, or maybe not all, but many of the higher profile incidents and accidents where a CVR of a longer duration than 2 hours would have been helpful up until 2018, which I assume is when they started working on this, which just really goes to show how long it takes to make laws happen in this country. But it goes back all the way to 2002, an incident in the Philippines that apparently, I guess these were two separate incidents. One, a flight control malfunction during approach, and another, an abrupt maneuver due to ground proximity warning alert and elevator damage. And then there's another one in 2003, 2006, 2007, 2009, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 18. And we know we have heard of many since 2018 as well. So they are definitely keeping track of every single time a CVR did not contain the critical information they would have needed because the 2-hour artificial limit erased that data.
Yeah. So all in all, very good news that this is now in force.
Sure is. We'll take it.
Jason, a few moments ago, you mentioned that it takes a long time to make laws in the United States.
If I put it that elegantly, sure.
And that's normally true, but then sometimes the president of the United States posts on social media and everyone in the aviation industry goes, "What?"
Yeah, it's a good thing that the president posting on social media does not equal law in any way, shape, or form. Otherwise, the entire U.S. aviation system would have been thrown into absolute chaos at no moment's notice earlier this week. What happened now?
Well, what happened was...
Or what didn't happen?
Yeah, what didn't happen was anything at this point. So nothing happened. But what could have happened had these words been taken seriously and literally is all Canadian-made aircraft could have stopped flying in the United States.
What we mean is not literally stop flying like if they were mid-air, but
not falling out of the sky.
Man, that would have been weird. I didn't know we had that technology.
Basically grounded and unable to operate flights.
Because they were unceremoniously decertified.
Decertified, yes.
Which is, Ian, I'm not sure if you know this, not a thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's never a good thing. When a thing that is not a thing could be a thing because no one knows what's happening. And I think this illustrates a unique danger in aviation policy at the moment, where we're seeing aviation safety policy by fiat, and that's not a good thing. What's increasingly even more of not a good thing is the amount of time and energy that was then spent trying to understand what was actually meant by this. Because with some clarification, it becomes a trade issue. But without clarification, it's a very, very large safety issue, because we're not talking about, when we say Canadian-made aircraft, we honestly didn't know what was being referred to. But if you take the broadest definition of Canadian-made aircraft operating in the United States, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of aircraft operating everything from private flights to regional flights for major U.S. carriers.
Oh, and don't forget about the helicopters used by law enforcement and medevacs and the military. And turns out Canada's quite important to aviation in the U.S. Who would have figured two countries so adept at producing aircraft could, have a lot riding on each other's production?
Right.
So where did this come from? Should I just read the stupid post? I'm going to read the stupid post.
I don't think we need to.
Okay, I won't read the stupid post.
We can put a link in the show notes, but I don't think we need to, because I think it's worth discussing where this came from. Where this came from is that Canada has been taking its time, and we'll get to why in a minute, has been taking its time to certify Gulfstream's newest jets. So the newest series of Gulfstream jets is not yet certified in Canada. And the only reason that they're able to operate in the United States is because the FAA gave them a limited exemption so that they could finish full-scale fuel icing testing in the G700 and G800.
Fuel icing, you say? So, like fuel icing, that thing that happened to that BA 777 at Heathrow where the fuel filter froze and then, it crashed on the runway, just short of the runway. That kind of problem?
That exact problem.
Oh, that's a problem. You want to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, the issue here is that the FAA granted a 3-year exemption that expires at the end of 2026 so that Gulfstream could finish full-scale testing to then certify that those aircraft are not subject to unwanted fuel icing. A concern that I think is top of mind when you're dealing with extremely cold climates, which most of Canada happens to be.
Yes. So somewhere at some point, somebody got in the president's ear, complained that my Gulfstream, or maybe my company's new aircraft, isn't certified in Canada. What are you going to do about it? Because this hurts the American people. And then the president decided to potentially, couldn't actually do this, hurt all of the American people by essentially grounding the majority of the U.S. aviation system, because this would have shut down Breeze entirely, shut down a good bulk of JetBlue's fleet, the entirety of Endeavor Air and any other CRJs operating for United Express and American Eagle, and who knows what other aircraft. It's almost like you can't just do that because it probably has pretty wide-reaching impacts. But this is where we are. This is the world we're in. This is the world, unfortunately, that has been voted into office. But thankfully, none of this came to pass. The potential 50% tariff on any aircraft sold in the U.S. from Canada, well, Airbus has already figured that out, and that's why they make them here in Alabama now, them being the A220. I think any A220 going to a U.S. airline is now rolled out of the Alabama facility and doesn't come out of Mirabel, I don't think. But this was just such a stupid thing to have to follow through. And of course, nobody had any idea this was coming. So no one at the FAA had any idea. And at the end of the day, it's a big nothing burger, at least for right now. Who knows?
And I think one of the things that I'm most concerned about here is that nobody at the FAA knew anything about this. And the FAA didn't have anything to say about this.
Yeah, because you can't pass laws on social media, nor is this a law that the president can even pass. This isn't a thing that can happen. But we look past that and just pretend like he can.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. But I also think a big part of the problem is that the FAA didn't know anything about this. And the FAA didn't say anything to that effect. They just didn't say anything. And I think that's one of the biggest problems here is that you have an agency, a safety agency that's responsible for the certification of aircraft in the United States, not saying anything while a politician is making a safety decision or purporting to make a safety decision. And I think that's what scares me most about this. And then you have a lot of people walking back and trying to say, oh, no, we meant new aircraft.
No, he didn't. He said what he meant to say. It's just what he said is nonsense, and it doesn't work that way. Civilization cannot operate in such a way. And every time this happens, it has to be walked back by people who could be doing more important things, like, I don't know, working on a law that implements 25-hour CVRs, and maybe that won't take 10 years next time.
I still think it would take that long, but your point is taken.
Yeah, it'll always take that long.
All right. Let's go to
Heathrow.
Let's go to the UK, where another Air India 787 is the subject of fuel cutoff switch speculation. Thankfully, everyone's fine. The flight in question operated normally. Nothing happened, and we didn't really know about this until after the flight. Here's what we understand to have happened. This is based on media reporting and the Indian Director General of Civil Aviation's response to media reporting. Their not response, I should say their rejoinder on news.
Oh.
So there you go.
That's how you know it's official.
Yes. So on the 1st of February, Air India flight 132 from London to Bangalore was operated by a 787-8 registration Victor Tango Alpha November X-ray. While attempting to start the engines in London, on 2 occasions, the crew observed that the fuel control switch did not remain positively latched in the run position when light vertical pressure was applied. The 3rd time, the switch latched correctly and stayed there. Before moving on, they made sure that the switch was where it was supposed to be, that the switch was latched into the run position, the engine parameters were all fine, there were no warnings, they moved on. They kept a close eye on it for the rest of the flight, and after they landed, they handed in a defect report. Air India then contacted Boeing. Boeing got back to them with recommended checks. Air India's engineering group observed the following. Both left and right switches were checked and found satisfactory, with the locking tooth pawl fully seated and not slipping from run to cutoff. When full force was applied parallel to the base plate, the switch remained secure. So when they tried to push the switches down without lifting them and moving them over the tooth, they remained secure. However, and now I'm quoting again, however, applying external force in an incorrect direction caused the switch to move easily from run to cutoff, due to the angular base plate allowing slip when pressed improperly with finger or thumb.
That gets quite wordy at the end there, doesn't it? But then it goes on a little bit more. What else did they have to say outside of that quote?
So based on Boeing's communication, the pull to unlock force was checked on the fuel control switch using the recommended procedure on the involved fuel cutoff switch, and the fuel control unit to be installed and fuel control cutoff switch of another aircraft. In all cases, the pull to unlock force was found within limits, and these inspections were carried out in the presence of DGCA officers. So everything seems to be fine as long as you follow procedures.
Yes, and to that effect, the last line of this rejoinder on news item says, the airline is being advised to circulate the Boeing recommended procedure for the operation of fuel cutoff switch to its crew members. Basically saying, just follow procedure, do the thing the manual says, and you'll be fine. I have to say, we spent a few minutes before the show this week kind of just staring at the relevant area of the controls of a 787, and there is also a video circulating that this rejoinder on news item mentions, even though that video that we found isn't even on a 787, it's on a 737. And it also says incorrectly that the 787 was grounded when it wasn't. Maybe this aircraft was on the ground a little longer than usual as they took a look at it and found nothing wrong. But I don't know. I'm torn on this one that yes, the switch works as designed if you follow instructions, but humans are known to be animals that do not always follow instructions to the T. And of course, not everyone is going to do the right thing every time. But there does seem to be a sufficient number of protections in place to avoid the switch accidentally moving from run to cutoff. But it is a little weird to me that the wording here that due to the angular base plate allowing slip when pressed improperly with finger or thumb, I mean, maybe that probably shouldn't be possible. Maybe there's a reason why it is. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but just kind of weird that it's possible at all to me.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe this is one of those things where we go, well, we did design this with this safety in mind. We did design this in a way that is maybe not foolproof. And so maybe it's worth revisiting the design for the future. Or maybe Boeing says, look, this is how it's supposed to work. You're not supposed to press it from the side. And you were never supposed to press it from the side. Just follow procedures.
Yeah, but on the other side of that debate, the human beings operating these switches are sitting off to the side, either to the right or left of this. You are not hovering directly on top of it unless, you put your arm over it and then rotate your arm down in a 90-degree angle and lift it directly up towards the ceiling. The humans controlling these switches are sitting off to the side at 90-degree angles. So it would seem inevitable that some lateral force would be applied to these switches, and it's not going to be a perfect, clean 180-degree pull away from the base of the switch here. So yeah, maybe a revision might be due for this, but honestly, it seems like this part is common across most Boeing aircraft. So it doesn't seem like it would be unique to the 787, but maybe it is. But I don't know. It seems like a lot to do about nothing, but maybe not. It's too hard to tell for me right now.
I would love to hear from someone with a bit more knowledge than I. So if you're listening to the show and you're going, I know what's happening here, please email us podcast@fr24.com.
No. They have to submit their own rejoinder on news item to us.
Yes, submit your own rejoinder on news item to podcast@fr24.com. Thank you.
There it is.
Let's head to Singapore because this week is also the Singapore Air Show. So Jason and I are not there, where it's much warmer than it is where we both are. But there is some news coming out of Singapore this week. Not any huge orders, but some interesting trickles of aircraft.
Yeah, it's some good stuff out there. Tiger Air Taiwan disclosed an order. I guess it must have been a previous order if they're disclosing it for 4 A321neo. Yay, I guess. But they get a little more interesting. Air Cambodia ordered 10 737 MAX 8 aircraft, which Boeing would love you to know that it is the first order of the 737 MAX family in Cambodia. I guess, yeah. Who else would have ordered it? I don't know if there are other Cambodian airlines of that size that could order that aircraft, but good for them. Here's a one I didn't see coming. Air Borneo ordered 8 ATRs, which would be a split of 5 72-600s and 3 42-600s. So that's pretty cool. But I think the coolest one isn't a passenger aircraft at all because it hasn't been too successful as a passenger aircraft. But there was an order for 6 firefighting variant of the C909. You don't hear much about that aircraft, but I think we covered quite a while ago about how they were splitting out the C909 into a bunch of different variants that could do things like firefighting or military work or some other stuff. What else can a C909 do?
They were going to do cargo. I think there may have even been a combi variant that they teased.
Yes.
So all sorts of things, trying to turn the C909 from a DC-9 copy to a 737-200 copy.
Cool.
I think.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Let's talk about some upcoming things as we move into the latter part of the latter half of this decade. So this was, I think, first reported by John Ostrower's team over at the Air Current last week, but kind of comes into focus as the Singapore Air Show ramps up, where Airbus is looking to garner enough pre-orders for an A220-500 variant to turn that aircraft into a reality.
Yes, the discussion of a stretched, again, version of the A220 has been going on for years and years and years at this point. This would be a roughly, give or take, 180-seat aircraft, so very comparable to the A320, but Airbus has struggled to get the A220 production at a place where they can financially make this work, either right now to get the number of aircraft out there working, produced with working engines is also another thing we'll talk about in a moment.
We'll get there in just a second.
Yeah, but there has to be enough interest in a stretch of the A220 out there before a company like Airbus would even get permission from its own board to go ahead and start the work on doing that, knowing that there's someone else out there already doing this. Embraer with its E2 family of aircraft is also in this very market space. So maybe we'll see it later this year. Maybe we'll see it at the big annual summer European Air Show. Remind me, is it Paris or is it Farnborough this year?
Farnborough this year.
Farnborough. So maybe we could see the A220-500 launched there. We don't know. But it seems more real now than it ever has been.
And yet it still doesn't seem real.
Yeah. Reuters is reporting that potential target carriers could be Delta, Air Canada, Air France, since they already operate the A220. Unsurprisingly, all three airlines declined to comment.
Very, very unsurprising there.
Yes, but I would look forward to that.
As Jason mentioned, there's a wrinkle here in that the current A220 family, among other aircrafts, are powered by an engine that has had trouble for some time.
That's one way to put it.
And if you're thinking, oh, that trouble's almost over, well, not quite.
No.
Also speaking out of the Singapore Air Show, Pratt & Whitney says that it expects the GTF recovery to take place through the end of the decade.
Yes, the quote is, and I'm reading from a Flight Global article, "We feel confident that by the end of this decade, we are going to be in a more normalized state for sure." Sure, that was Whitney president of Commercial Engines Rick Derulo on February 4th in Singapore. So he didn't say it'll be over. He said it will be, quote, a more normalized state for sure.
Oh, well, even better.
That's really hedging your bet. So it won't be gone and over with and done with. No, it'll be a more normalized state. So this has been going on forever at this point, and it will continue to go on forever. He went on to say, we see this fleet completely coming out of the challenge of AOGs by the end of 2026. So I guess that's good. By the end of this year, they'll have enough engines to get all of the aircraft back in the air, at least for all the airlines that it hasn't destroyed at this point, because there are a number of those. But yeah, do we believe them?
No comment?
Yeah, no comment, just like Delta.
Exactly. Let's wrap up our conversation about Singapore and talk about something that I'm not sure it'll ever come to pass, but I sure hope it does because it looks really cool.
And I didn't even know this was a thing until I read it in the show notes. And now I agree. Tell me about this thing because it looks stupid.
But so cool.
It looks so doofy. But what is it?
So what it is Radia's Windrunner concept, which is a concept aircraft for an ultra heavy lift freighter. So think something along the lines of C5 or Antonov AN-124. This particular configuration is a 4-engined, downward-facing winglet AN-225 empennage plus a bulbous 747 was stung by a bee and is having an allergic reaction.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. You know that photo of the prop version of like the little tiny 747, how it just looks like it's got this cockpit that sticks up out of nowhere and doesn't look right. It kind of has some of that characteristics too. Like it's just got this little tiny little cockpit hunk that sticks out the top. It's just, man, I hope this thing becomes real, because they claim that you could just stick an entire wind turbine blade inside and ship it anywhere. You cannot do that today with most aircraft.
Yeah, I mean, I get the idea here because what they're talking about is being able to replace or fill some of that capacity that is not taken up by the AN-124, allows this particular aircraft to supplement the C-5 and especially the C-17s, where they can carry things like V-22s and just roll them on. I don't think this is going to happen, but I hope they at least try and build one.
Yeah, so they have their website. The headlining image is a bunch of fighter jets being eaten by the Windrunner. They claim 10x bigger cargo volume than a 777 and able to land on unpaved landing strips. Okay, you can say anything you want because it's not real. But then they really seem to be marketing this as an aircraft specifically for carrying wind turbine blades, which is a very, I feel like, niche thing. But then they have a bunch of pictures of like why you can't do this by truck, because there are bridges on the road and you can't drive through a bridge if you have payloads that are bigger than the bridge. So here's this aircraft that can go anywhere and do anything. And they have this timeline of 4 a.m. Their day begins loading blades into Windrunner. And then by 7 a.m., taxi and takeoff. And then, of course, there's a whole line of these aircraft going out, not just one, but the entire hub is full of them. By 9 a.m., they're at cruising altitude, and they can fly up to 1,240 miles from a hub at an altitude of 41,000 feet. And then by 10 a.m., they are landing on rough terrain, because this aircraft can land on semi-prepared airstrip as short as 6,000 feet, something no other large commercial aircraft can achieve, because those are real aircraft. They exist. This doesn't. By 11 a.m., you're unloading the blades. By 2 p.m., you're building your wind turbine, and your day is done, and you go home and you crack open a drink and you do it all again the next day. I guess you could also put a bunch of Chinooks and rocket boosters in there. But I guess the wind turbine blade is what makes the most sense for this aircraft because of the shape of it, where it kind of tilts up towards the back of it, and so does kind of a wind turbine. So maybe that's why they're going so heavy with the marketing for that particular type of cargo.
I just have a question about why the aircraft takes off at about 7 a.m. and reaches cruising altitude at 9 a.m.
Well, it's only got 4 engines. If you want to get to cruising altitude faster than that, you need 6, like any very large aircraft should have.
Self-respecting twin vertical stabilizer aircraft. Fair enough.
Yes, of course. They don't mention any kind of engine or anything like that, of course, because it's not a real aircraft. So
what they say is that they will use an existing commercial engine.
Oh, sure. I mean, they kind of look like run-of-the-mill. So scale is really difficult here because it's a very large aircraft, so the engines look really small in comparison. But I don't know, from the renderings, these look pretty generic. Maybe I don't know. I don't even want to guess because I don't know. Doesn't matter.
We don't know. So we can make up whatever we want and say they're going to be GE 9Xs. Why not?
Ooh, that'd be nice. But hey, if this thing is real, I sure as hell want to go out and see it, because it is the goofiest looking aircraft, but there's a real need for it. They wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't a need for it, because there is certainly nothing else out there even remotely this large.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can get this off the ground and at what point things move around in the configuration and where things end up in the end. I think that'll be the one thing to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go from things that don't exist to things that might not exist for very long and talk about Spirit Airlines.
Oof. Ouch. That was a harsh transition.
I think it's harsh but fair.
Harsh but fair. Yeah, go on.
Spirit Airlines has done a number of things to reconfigure their business, but they've also done some marketing things lately. They had that ugly sweater livery that they painted on one of their aircraft, and now they're joining the ranks of Delta and United with trading cards that their pilots are being given to give out to passengers. So you can now collect your very own Spirit Airlines trading cards.
Hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think this is going to be the thing that saves Spirit, but it's pretty cool nonetheless. I do particularly love that they have cards for aircraft that aren't in their fleet anymore, like the A319. But at least the card for those aircraft is in one of their old liveries, so I guess that's technically correct.
The best kind of correct.
Yeah, odd to be handing out cards for aircraft that aren't in your fleet because you went through bankruptcy twice and shed those aircraft from your fleet, but keeping the memory alive.
Well, you know what might save Spirit Airlines, Jason?
Money.
Money. Not this amount of money, but every little bit counts. United is in the process of purchasing 2 gates at O'Hare from Spirit for $30 million.
Hey, okay. United, in its never-ending quest to absolutely crush American Airlines by any means necessary at Chicago O'Hare, continues with even more gates. And apparently, Spirit would have probably given up in due course anyway, maybe next year. But if United can snatch them up for the measly cost of $30 million, that's a rounding error to United in this fight. But that's how many gates does that leave Spirit left with? I can't imagine they had many to begin with.
They do not have many left. Though, there are some common use gates that they still have access to. But I don't know how many dedicated gates they have after these divestments, because they've already gotten rid of a few.
They have.
So it can't be that many. And I don't have the gate allocation schematic in front of me, though I do have it somewhere around, because United's number of gates just keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up.
Yeah, I'm going to miss Spirit, especially in Chicago, since I've taken Spirit out to Chicago on our hot dog run so many times.
Yeah,
it was usually
absolutely.
so reasonable, but now I don't think it's even possible to do a day trip on Spirit from New York.
That's sad.
Mm.
Well, let's continue to talk about United, because this is an interesting one. Today has been a very interesting day for United.
But also not an interesting day, which is good.
Yeah, in a very good way. So last week, they sent out a message that said, hey, we're going to do a massive, massive technological upgrade to a bunch of our systems. We are going to not make anything available to travelers. Not the app, not the website. You're not going to be able to pretty much do anything during this outage period.
Nor will our employees, which is also the particularly interesting part.
Yeah. And to make sure that we don't impact anybody unduly, we're also going to cancel a bunch of flights that are scheduled to depart during this outage period while we do these upgrades.
Yeah, this was interesting. So during this outage, which lasted from 1:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. Central Standard Time, the airline essentially was offline. You couldn't book a flight. You couldn't check in. You couldn't make trip changes. You nor anyone at United could do anything. Everything was frozen. And this is not unheard of for an airline to do IT work overnight. Sometimes it goes well and you never know what happens. Other times it doesn't go well and you really know it happened. But in this case, because it went through 5 a.m. Central, which is 6 a.m. Eastern, that's already into the beginning of the day. And if you're in a situation where you're operating a 6 a.m. bank of flights, but you can't check in for flights until 6 a.m., you can't operate those 6 a.m. flights. But to give itself some cushion, United culled, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think damn near 1,000 flights from its schedule today, because it wanted to give at least a couple hours of hedging their bet time, I would say, in case it went a little long or to give people time to check in. But there are routes that normally have a 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. flight, and there were none, I think, from United in the air until 9 a.m. Eastern today that weren't already in the air. So not everything was grounded. Flights that took off before continued on, but when I woke up this morning and looked at the map, there was not a single United flight over the continental United States, which is nuts.
Pretty incredible. But the nice thing for United and anyone flying United today or trying to check in for a flight or trying to make changes to a flight is everything seems to have gone the way it was supposed to. And we didn't hear boo from anyone with problems.
Yes, of course, because as we've heard from our friend who went up to Chicago to headquarters to pull an all-nighter, and in case something went wrong, Corp Comms would be there at the ready. But thankfully, nothing did go wrong, and they got to go home early.
Excellent.
That's the way you want it to be.
That's what we like to hear.
But yeah, not many IT upgrades completely take your airline offline. That's you really don't want that to go wrong.
Yeah, hopefully we'll hear. We heard somewhat about what they were up to. And now that it's done, hopefully we'll be able to hear a bit more about what went into this upgrade, what they actually changed, and what that means for the airline moving forward.
Yeah, United was surprisingly coy about this. I've heard various things like moving its internal shares reservation system to the cloud, or who knows with airlines. They have so many antiquated systems, and United is particularly good at slapping really nice coats of paint over really old antiquated systems that seem to work pretty well. But at some point, you got to take the Commodore 64 offline and replace it with, I don't know, Pentium 2 if we're going in airline speak. But progress is progress.
Progress is progress. And sometimes progress just means you're like everybody else. And in the case of Southwest Airlines, they're just like everybody else now.
Wow, what a slick transition once again. Good job. In other major could go very wrong things, Southwest has officially become like every other airline and had its very first flights with assigned seats this week. And it was fine.
Seats were assigned.
Yes, the world keeps spinning. The sun still shines. Birds still chirping. And yeah, some people were a little disappointed in the end, but money is, at the end of the day, the most important thing to a business. And there was a lot of money being left on the table. So Southwest, since the beginning of this year, reconfigured all of its aircraft to have extra legroom seating on board and got that all implemented in time for the new world of assigned seating and boarding groups and all that. And it turns out it's fine.
It's fine. You know what's not fine, Jason? Getting left on a bus.
Oh, man. I mean, if you're on a normal city bus, like you get to the end of the route and you just get off the bus. But when you're at an airport, you don't want to be left on the bus because that probably means that the plane is left without you. But that doesn't happen. That can't happen.
It shouldn't happen.
It shouldn't happen, but it did happen. Where did it happen?
Well, it happened to Thai AirAsia passengers, and they were left stranded wherever they were left stranded because, of course, this page is refusing to reload now that I've moved away from... Yeah, tell me out, Jason.
I gotcha. So AirAsia, of course, a low-cost airline, was flying a very early flight in the morning from Bangkok to Hat Yai. I don't know where that is, but it was an A320 with 136 people booked on board, but only 113 passengers made it on board, leaving the balance of 23 people not on board. They were left on the bus and the plane left without them. Only, as this article I'm reading from 1 Mile at a Time, which itself sourced the information from the Bangkok Post, a passenger on board was very confused because their travel mate, who was at the gate with them, but on a different bus, did not appear on the airplane. And they said, that's weird. So the aircraft had already started taxiing, and this passenger said, hey, what the heck is going on? Where's my friend or whatever? And eventually the crew realized, something not right here. And they actually returned to the gate where they were able to confirm there's a busload of passengers that is somewhere else and not on board this aircraft. And they eventually sorted it out. And those 23 passengers were able to get on the aircraft, and the flight did take off late. But something like this shouldn't be possible because the way bus gates work, and I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast has been on a flight with a bus gate at some point before, but the passenger scans their boarding pass in the terminal or building or wherever they are. They are logged as boarded. They get on the bus goes to the airplane, passengers get on the airplane, and then the all-important passenger count happens to make sure that every passenger, the exact number that scanned into the flight, is on board the airplane. But for whatever reason, that did not happen. And apparently there were two findings: that one, the count did not happen, and that a ground agent who was supposed to communicate with the lead flight attendant confirmed whether the aircraft is ready for departure. Well, that didn't happen either. So none of this should have been possible, but that's a new level of being inconvenienced by a bus gate.
I mean, can you imagine just sitting around on a bus somewhere on the airfield and just watching your airplane leave?
Yeah, I mean, the details aren't 100% here, so we don't know if the bus had ever left its point of origin at the terminal or whether it was driving around on a detour or whether it was plainside and the doors just didn't open and the plane said, see you later. Don't really know. But apparently the cabin crew just assumed that the missing passengers had simply missed the flight and would catch the next one, which I guess it's possible that 20-something passengers could no-show, but that seems like you should.
The whole thing seems very odd. Very, very odd.
Yes. AirAsia confirmed the incident and said it attributed to coordination and communication errors between staff and that they will tighten procedures by requiring cabin crew and not just the ground staff to conduct a final headcount before pushback on flights using bus gates, which it's AirAsia, so that's probably a majority of its flights.
I thought that whole statement was going to be whoopsie daisy.
Whoops. It happens.
Yeah. Let's get to the end of the show where we talk about things in quick succession. Right now, we have 2 new special liveries for Lufthansa coming into the mix. Lufthansa got its first of what I believe are going to be 2 retro livery aircraft, an A321neo. That aircraft was on delivery the other day and then didn't get to go where it was going because it was snowing in Frankfurt. We were watching it and I was hoping that somebody would get a photo. And then we started getting news from Frankfurt that no, Frankfurt airport is closed. And so
Whoops.
That aircraft ended up in Dusseldorf.
Huh.
And eventually made it onward. The 100th anniversary livery A350 has also been redelivered after paint and is currently, as we record, in the air on its first revenue flight on its way to San Francisco.
Oh, that's nice. It is such a looker, that aircraft, and I'm really happy Lufthansa is going so all out with these 100th anniversary logos. We've come a long way from when they introduced, I think, the first A320neo in revenue service, and it was just a tiny, 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 tiny little sticker on the aircraft, and they eventually sorted that out. But Lufthansa is doing good here. Kind of makes me sad that United is not, but I guess they spent the fancy paint budget on 2 gates at O'Hare.
I absolutely refuse to believe, until I am told otherwise by Scott Kirby himself, I refuse to believe that that is all they are going to do to celebrate the airline's 100th anniversary.
I don't know, man. It's already February. If they're planning on doing something, clock is ticking.
I'm just saying. I refuse to believe it until he tells it to me himself.
Okay.
Because, anyway, they said they were going to do something. And if that's something they're going to do, that's not something. That's a sticker.
It's nothing.
Anyway, tell me about Aer Lingus and Manchester, because it's an Irish airline operating in the UK, but not anymore.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Not anymore. Apparently, Aer Lingus, on very short notice, will completely exit from Manchester, at least on its long-haul services that it did offer, I believe, here to New York JFK and some seasonal stuff to Orlando, because of course, everyone wants to go from Manchester to Orlando. I remember back in the day where Virgin would have like 9 aircraft on the ground from Manchester and Orlando, but very short notice. Aer Lingus completely exiting the long-haul market in Manchester due to apparently costs just simply being too high, staffing-wise. This one's pretty rare for a legacy airline like this. I guess you can call it a legacy airline to just completely, on extremely short notice, just rug pull out from passengers and say, sorry, whatever you have booked before, now you don't, we're out of here.
From my understanding, the pullout also has a lot to do with how the AOC is structured and what type of requirements were involved. So it was one of those things where like they were either going to do it or they were going to have to just cut it completely. And it's really unfortunate that they couldn't make this work. But it's one of those things where airlines try to save money any way they can. And they were trying to save money through this structure of subsidiaries and base launches and things like that. And it just didn't work for them. So on to the next thing.
All right.
So there you go. Jason, speaking of airlines no more, Jetstar Japan is going to be no more. Qantas is out.
Yes.
And something will come next.
Yes, joining in the graveyard of Jetstar offshoots. Jetstar Japan, apparently Qantas has decided to sell its 1/3 stake after it's already done the same thing to Jetstar Asia back in last year. Because apparently there's intense regional competition, high fuel supplier costs, and things just didn't work out. So Jetstar Japan will live on under a new brand name of some sort with different ownership. Don't know what that brand is. I'm sure it will be something nice, but it will not be the Jetstar brand, which has really been reeled back recently after Qantas is refocusing on itself, taking some time to work on its own operation.
It's taking some me time.
Taking some me time to think about its lackluster few years and really figure out what it wants to be in its next 100 years of existence. But a part of that apparently won't be international offshoots of Jetstar brands, which is fine, I guess.
I mean, something will take its place.
Yes, something always does.
Well, last week we said, hey, JetBlue's doing this really cool thing where they sometimes issue new special liveries. And in this case, they're having voting like they did for the previous one. And you can vote. Well, I hope you voted when we told you to vote, because apparently voting is closed. They've made their choice, and the paint is already coming this spring.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if this was a real competition, if it's going to move that fast. But maybe JetBlue can move that fast. I don't know. But they have already picked a winner. It's actually not the one I voted for, which is too bad.
It's not the one I voted for either.
No, too bad. But love a livery contest. Love how many special liveries JetBlue has, especially ones featuring its unique, not unique, but its destinations that make JetBlue JetBlue. And this one will look pretty damn good, I think. And I'm looking forward to see it.
There were no bad choices.
No, there were no bad choices. There were only good choices. And it's just great that JetBlue really tries to involve people in picking these liveries. And even if the winners don't win, just the fact that they get their names out there as artists is pretty great as well.
Yeah, I think this is a great initiative. I think it's fantastic to have these special liveries. I think it's fantastic to represent the culture of your destinations. And I think it's fantastic to have your customers and just aviation enthusiasts generally involved in helping make these choices. It's almost like an airline could do that for their 100th anniversary if they wanted to.
Oh, bringing it back. Scott Kirby, pick up the phone. He needs to talk to you.
Oh boy. Are you going to get email or what? I hope we get email. I hope I've goaded Scott Kirby into emailing me and saying, fine, we'll do a special 100th anniversary livery.
Maybe Scott Kirby will send you one of these coveted rejoinders on news items.
Ooh, I would love to receive a rejoinder on a news item from both Scott Kirby and any one of our listeners. You can always email us at podcast@fr24.com. On that note, this has been episode 356. I am Ian Petchnick in Stockholm, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.